this nice chilly morning. Jan and I were just talking. We went from 70 yesterday to when we got up 37 this morning. So, yeah, good weather to catch a cold in, isn't it? So, yeah. So we're glad you're here this morning, braving the colder weather. So. And we have a visitor back with us, Reed Lanham. So, Reed, welcome back. Glad to have you. So, if you've not met Reed, introduce yourself. He said a lot of people did last week. He can't remember everybody's name, so tell him your name again. So, but we're glad to have him back. Keep in prayers Linda Williams. Martha saw her yesterday, right? So, you want to give a brief update, Martha?
Well, she seemed to be doing well. She's wanting to go home, ready to go home. She does not have a cast on her leg. It's whatever they did through surgery. So she's having physical therapy, and her granddaughter was there with her, and I think she's there a lot with her. And she didn't seem to be sick, so I think the pneumonia must be over with. I didn't stay very long. I think she was watching her show, and I didn't want to interrupt her NCIS. She and I have that in common. But anyway, she looked good.
Good.
So hopefully, she'll be going home soon.
Good. All right. And Johnny Allison still out. I texted with him early in the week, and he's still not doing great. Said to keep him in our prayers, and so I think this recovery for him is. I know it's a lot longer than he expected because he originally told me that he was having the surgery on Friday, and he said, "Well, I'll see you Sunday," and I said, "Well, I don't know about that, Johnny." So, yeah. So keep Johnny in your prayers. He's so much help to us in our audio visual, so we appreciate him. So, and then Nancy Stevens is feeling okay. She just doesn't want to get out and be exposed to something because of the issues that she had with COVID some time ago. So she's being cautious, which is wise. So, but she is now feeling okay, recovered from the flu when we texted with her this week. And then I think I saw Terry Comet go by. Did I see her go by out there? Yeah. So keep her in your prayers. Sandra, did you get an up? Let me. Hold on.
She said she's going to see an oncologist, and they found a couple of spots in different places. So she's had breast cancer in the past, so they've got to see if all of this is connected. She's got a long road ahead of her.
Mm-hmm. And the diagnosis was lymphoma. Is that correct? What they found thus far. So yeah, keep Terry in your prayers. Yeah, that's. I think they weren't expecting that to find that. I don't believe so. Yeah. So, all right. Who else this morning? Anybody else we need to keep in our prayers? Remember this morning. Any other announcements? Your brother does what tomorrow? Okay. If everything goes well, Nona's brother Tommy will finish up this current round of treatment tomorrow. So continue to keep him in your prayers. So, okay. Anything else? Yes, Melinda. Yep. Yeah. Great. Yeah. Great. Great. Yeah. Melinda says she has a praise that all her husband David's blood work came back well, and that in 3 months he'll go back for a PET scan just to confirm all of that. So that is a praise. So thank you, Melinda, for sharing that. We want to share praises as well as prayer concerns. So thank you. Anything else? Okay. With that, who would like to open us in prayer this morning? Okay. I'm thinking, is it Jill or Ken here this morning? Who's it going to be? Who can go first here? All right, Ken's turn. Go, Ken. Thank you, Ken. All right, we're going to finish up, believe it or not, the lesson entitled Dream, 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 Vision, Vision, Vision this morning and move forward from there. So just a little bit of a recap to begin with. Martha, if you would, let's start and read Genesis 26:34 through 35, please, verses 34 and 35.
When Esau was 40 years old, he married Judith, the daughter of Beeri the Hittite, and Basemath, the daughter of Elon the Hittite, and they brought grief to Isaac and Rebekah.
All right, so Esau was 40 years old, and he decides to marry these two women. And it seems strange, to me anyway, that this insertion is here in the Bible about Esau's marriage of these two women, because it really had not fit in with the story to this point. So, but here it's put in, and we wondered why, and we mentioned maybe a couple of reasons. That first, we talked about like father, like son. If you remember, after Sarah died, Abraham married Keturah, who was not of the clan as such, and so here we see maybe Esau following in his father's footsteps and marrying these foreign women, or possibly Esau was doing this in order to, what's the right word here, get back at, that's not a word, but get back at his parents for the favoritism, or particularly his mother for the favoritism that she had shown his brother versus him. So it could be that he was doing this, and then yeah, Jan says it does, and she's correct. Does not say if this was if he married both of them at the same time, or if he married them at separate times. So we don't know, but to that extent. But they were foreign women, so we're told, Hittites. So the question is, who were the Hittites? Wow. All right. Karen has done her homework. Yeah, they were descendants of Noah, son Ham, who's Noah's grandson Canaan. So the Hittites were descendants of that line as such. So thank you, Karen. So do you remember there was we might call infamous descendant of Ham? Do you remember who that was? Who would have been a relative here of these folks as well? He's a son of Noah. Yeah. He was a great-grandson of Noah, I guess. Got that right? Who? Nimrod. Nimrod was of this line as well. So Nimrod, whose kingdom, it says, started with Babylon. Nimrod built, it's thought, the Nineveh, the capital of Assyria, and tradition has it that he also built Babel. So that's an infamous relative here. So also included in the descendants of Canaan are the Philistines. So here we see the Hittites were basically cousins of the Philistines. So what does it tell us that the relationship was between Esau's wives and Isaac and Rebekah? It was what? A grievous or tense relationship. The New American Standard Bible says they brought Isaac and Rebekah a lot of grief. The Holden Christian Standard Bible says they made life bitter for Isaac and Rebekah. How do you think that Esau's wives brought Isaac and Rebekah a lot of grief and made life bitter for them? Yep, Jamie. What's that? They were ungodly. Jamie's was going to say the same thing. Yeah, they worship different gods. They would not be a Becky. Yeah. They were daughter-in-laws to Rebekah, so they, as Becky says, they were really women in general then were to be seen and not heard, basically. So Becky says that more than likely that they were not very obedient to their mother-in-law. Yeah.
And they were 2 against 1.
And they were 2 against 1.
Now, is that, before that, there was just one wife, right? I mean, Abraham had Sarah and Isaac had Rebekah, and then now Esau has taken 2 wives. So
yeah,
that kind of stirred things up, I imagine, too.
Yeah, but Abraham had a concubine, so
well, I know
not
they had concubines, but
yeah,
they didn't have
a quote
wives were in charge.
Yeah, so here there were 2 wives. Good point. Versus wives are in charge. So what do you think? Do you think these 2 women were in the ear of Esau about anything? What do you think they were in his their? Let's see. What? Take everything they wanted, all what his parents had, Esau had. Yeah, maybe so, yeah. What else could they have been in the ear of? Worshiping other gods. Y'all are being very spiritual here. What was the relationship between Esau and his mother and his father? Yeah. Yeah, Esau was the favorite of his father. So here I could hear these women in the ears of Rebekah saying and Isaac saying, well, particularly Rebekah saying, y'all have mistreated Esau. You have mistreated Esau. He's been mistreated, blah, blah, blah. So in telling Esau this, Esau, you've been mistreated. You need to stand up for yourself, blah, 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 to your parents. So again, I think that's a possibility. So how often do we see spouses causing rifts in their spouses' family relationships? Happens on occasion, doesn't it? Yeah, so not that unusual. So I think here we see something that is somewhat typical, that these wives of Esau are causing a rift. They're causing grief for Isaac and Rebekah. So with that, got to remember way back when we started this lesson, what are the takeaways or personal applications from this lesson? What did you take away from it? Look back at your notes and don't get in your in-laws' business, yeah. Yeah, good one. Don't be unequally yoked together. So here we have a supposed believer in Esau. At least he comes from a believing family, yoked to a bunch of idol-worshiping women. Good point, Novella. Good one, Karen. Be careful what you do because your kids are watching and they're probably going to follow in your footsteps. So as we we said, that could have been what Esau was doing, following in his grandfather's footsteps and marrying women outside of the clan as such. Good one. What else? Well, while you're thinking, if you remember, I think this lesson has been about, if you think way back, about two things. It's about altars, A-L-T-A-R-S, and wells. And altars commemorate the goodness and blessings of God in their lives. So we see this Abraham's family at various times, including Isaac, establishing altars to worship God, to commemorate God's blessings. And also we see Abraham and Isaac digging wells. So wells were to serve as blessings for others. So here the question is, are we building altars in our lives, physical or mental altars in our lives, and are we digging wells, not physical wells, but not literal wells, but figurative wells? Are we digging wells to provide blessings to others in our life? And then you remember that here it said that Yahweh was seen in Isaac. Are others seeing Yahweh, seeing God in us? Are we readily recognizable as followers of God, as believers, as followers of Jesus? Is that seen in our lives? And have we removed bitterness from our lives, and are we demonstrating hospitality in our lives? What's that, Becky? Tennessee always has hospitality. We're a hospitable place, huh? Yeah. So hopefully that's true. Hopefully that Tennesseans and we are always showing hospitality in our lives. All right, so how do we see hope in this lesson? Hope with a capital H. Jill says the principle is if we follow God's direction in our lives, we can expect God's blessings. And God's blessings being who? Jesus. Good answer. So I think good answer, Jill. Thank you. Yeah, she did it again, yeah. So dreams and visions may not be as prevalent today as they were in the Old Testament or even in the time of the early church. But believers, we as believers today have the Holy Spirit living within us. And we have the printed Word of God. So we have hope because we have God through His Holy Spirit living in us and in His Word, the Bible. Okay. Anything as we turn the page on this lesson? All right, we've turned the page. Moving to Genesis chapter 27. Jamie's giving out the handout. So as she's doing that, in today's lesson, we'll see Rebekah, Mrs. Isaac as such, and her son, Jacob, working together to deceive and pull off a big sting on Isaac. So this reminds me of the movie, The Sting. It's an American epic, I guess you would say, caper movie. It was released in 1973, and it featured two of the most popular actors, maybe of all time, you might say, who won Academy Awards, Robert Redford and Paul Newman, and it won a number of 7 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. So let's take a couple of minutes because this lesson, this chapter is all about a sting. Let's take a couple of minutes and watch the trailer to the movie, The Sting.
She picked him clean. He never missed it.
Remember that Sting experience? How good you felt? Now, The Sting, winner of 7 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, is back.
Chicago was the place to be in 1936. In those days, the big con was a dying art, until a first-class grifter on the lam from the FBI and a young gaffer from Joliet joined forces to con the Big Mick.
He's not as tough as he thinks. Neither are we.
Paul Newman is Henry Gondorff. There wasn't a con he couldn't run, and there wasn't a sucker he couldn't gaff. Robert Redford is Johnny Hooker, a young grifter with plenty of moxie.
$3 grand on the red, Jimmy.
But he's a sucker for Lady Luck
Tough luck, kid.
and a sap for Lady Love.
Thanks for the big evening, Hooker. Next time you want to spend $50 on me, mail it.
Robert Shaw is the Mark. In the underworld, he's the Big Mick.
Name's Lonergan. Doyle Lonergan.
It starts with the setup.
You owe me 15 grand, pal.
Then you bait the hook.
Your boss is quite a card player, Mr. Kelly. How does he do it?
He cheats.
You play him on the wire.
The wire's been out of date for 10 years. That's why he won't know it.
Now he's ready for the sting.
He's there. Let's get on it.
Listen to me. Don't go back to your place tonight.
$500,000 to win. Lucky Dan.
Paul Newman and Robert Redford. This time, they might get away with it.
Well, does anybody remember that movie? Yeah, good. Well, certainly it was a good movie, but there are a number of great deceptions or stings in history. You recall any of them? Well, yeah, the Garden of Eden. I didn't even have that one. Yeah, y'all are so biblical and spiritual. Yeah, the Garden of Eden. Yeah, Satan worked a big sting there. So with a snake. Yeah, good one. What else? Anything else? Watergate was kind of a sting, I guess you'd say, a con in a way. Yeah. D-Day. I had D-Day. Ken, what about D-Day? Yeah, Ken says they had the Germans convinced it'd be at Calais, which was the most narrow place in the English Channel, versus Normandy, France. And if I remember correctly, I didn't look this up, but I think General Patton was in charge of building a bunch of plywood tanks and trucks and so forth, and up in northern, at this smallest point of the crossing at Calais, across from Calais in England, building this so the Germans would think the D-Day was coming from there versus south in Normandy. Was it Patton? Do you remember?
It was.
Yeah, it was. I think so. He was in charge. He was wanting to get in. He didn't like that position very much because he wanted to get into the war as such. So, what else? Anything else? What's that? Yeah, the Green New Deal. Yeah. So yeah. What's that? Being coherent. Well, that's a good point. There was kind of a ruse for a number of years, really, as to what his mental faculties were and what they presented them to be and what they really were. I hadn't thought about that one. That's a good one. The Palestinians, what? The Palestinian pagers. Ken's coming up with all these good ones. Yeah, that the Israelis bugged all those Palestinian pagers to blow up and so forth. So that was in planning, they say for multiple years to accomplish that. Yeah, so that was a sting. The what? The Trojan horse. I had that one. Very good. Yeah, that during the Trojan War, Odysseus, yeah, famously crafted this giant wooden horse, and in this giant wooden horse he had a bunch of soldiers in there, and this horse was the emblem of the city of Troy. So it's filled with all these soldiers, and he told the Trojan leaders that this was a gift, it was an offering to the goddess Athena, whose temple was destroyed by the Greeks. So he was giving them this great gift. Well, as soon as they got it into inside the city and night came, all these soldiers came out of the horse and they massacred the city. Yep, so that good one. Yeah, 9/11 was maybe possibly certainly a deception. Yep, good.
Midway, when they got the, I don't know how to explain it, but in the, they tricked the Japanese so that we knew they were going to attack Midway.
Well, Martha, you heard that. So Midway, in terms of the deception of them, I guess, pulling the Japanese into attacking Midway, and they were prepared for it in advance, had a lot of messages that
they put a code word in a message, and so the Japanese, that's how they found out where they were going to attack Midway.
Yeah, so they tricked them because they put it in there intentionally. What else? I had one other one. I can't believe y'all didn't mention this one. The sinking the Lusitania. Y'all got all kinds of them. I was thinking of the Ponzi scheme. Yeah, the Ponzi scheme that it's been this whole concept of Ponzi, taking one person's money to reward another person and keep going on and so forth. And let's see what his name was. Charles Ponzi from Lugo, Italy, made this famous in the 1920s. And with he was selling foreign, let's see what they call it, discounted postal reply coupons. So he was selling these postal reply coupons, and he said he was buying them at a discount. But in America, you could redeem them for face value. So what he was really doing is taking this person's money to repay this person and so forth, and just building on it. And ultimately, after about a year, they figured this out, and they arrested him, and the whole Ponzi scheme was about $20 million that people lost. Well, that was nothing compared to Bernie Madoff. If you remember a few years ago, Bernie Madoff had a Ponzi scheme as such, and he took folks for $20 billion with a B. So, again, there have been, as you just said, a whole bunch of deception schemes, cons, whatever you want to call them, throughout history. So, in today's lesson, though, we're going to look at a con that is pulled off by Rebecca and her son Jacob. So let's first read, Martha, if you would, Genesis 27, verses 1 through 4.
When Isaac was old and his eyes were so weak that he could not see, he called his older son Esau and said to him, "My son," and he answered, "Here am I." He said, "Look, I am old and do not know the day of my death. Take your hunting gear, your quiver and bow, and go out into the field and hunt some game for me. Then make me a delicious meal that I love and bring it to me to eat, so that I can bless you before I die."
All right, thank you, Mark. So we're going to take a look at each of the characters in this sting or deception, and the first one we're going to look at is the mark, and the mark here is Isaac. So with that, Dr. William Culberson, the former president of Moody Bible Institute, said, "Lord, help us to end well." Someone else once said, the end of life reveals the ends of life. The end of life reveals the ends of life. So here we're going to see that Isaac thinks that he's near the end of his life, and he wants to take action as such. So what's the situation in Genesis 27, verse 1? Isaac was old. Isaac's eyesight has failed, and it's Isaac at this point is at least 100 years old. We know that because when he got married, he was 40 years old. When they had the twins, of Jacob and Esau, he was 60 years old because they were 20 years had passed. And now we just heard that Esau was 40 years old, so 40 plus 20 plus 40 is he's at least 100 years old now. So the third thing we learned too in this verse, that he called his older son, what he called his older son? My son. What's significant about that? What do you think about Isaac calling Esau my son? He did not say our son. So here we're seeing this favoritism in the family is being perpetuated. I'll get it out in a second. Perpetuated by Isaac favoring Esau over Jacob. So why did Isaac favor Esau anyway? Well, he was a few minutes or seconds or whatever older. Yeah, he was a hunter. Why did he favor? He did favor. That is, why did he favor him as a hunter? What did Isaac like? He liked the outdoors.
He liked to eat.
He liked to eat. Genesis 25:28 tells us, now Isaac loved Esau because he, being Isaac, had a taste for game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. So Isaac's worldly desires, his desire for game, ruled his heart and subsequently his mind. So what is Isaac's observation about his life in Genesis 27:2? I'm an old man and said I might die any day now. So Isaac here thought he was on his deathbed, but however we learn as we go further in Genesis that Isaac actually lives another 20 years. So he's not really on his deathbed here. So Isaac having this observation about his life, what mindset you think results in him? What's his mindset? What's my last meal going to be? Yeah.
He's thinking about the future of his family.
He's thinking about the future of his family, and in what regard?
Passing on everything to Esau.
Passing on everything. Passing on particularly the business of blessing. If you remember, the birthright had already been taken, let's call it that, taken by Jacob from Esau, but the blessing is still out there. So Isaac now on his deathbed, or at least he thinks he's on his deathbed, has this sense of urgency, and he wants to take care of this business of blessing. So with that, in Genesis 27:3, verses 3 through 4, what is Isaac's plan? Yeah, Esau, go hunting, kill some game, prepare a good meal for me, and then I can bless you. Exactly. So evidently Esau had learned to cook. Why did Esau learn to cook? Wonder why. What's that?
Maybe his wives wouldn't.
What's that?
Maybe his wives wouldn't cook.
Maybe his wives wouldn't cook. He's out hunting, so he learned to cook while he's out there. Esau had kind of an interesting story around eating. What do you remember? Yeah, he sold his birthright for a bowl of soup, basically. So evidently he might not have been able to cook, so he came in and said, hey, cook me up some, I want some of that soup you've cooked up there, Jacob. So I guess after that he said, well, I'm going to learn to cook, so I don't have to depend on Jacob anymore. So, yeah, so maybe that's it. But, all right, so what's the key problem here with Isaac's plan? There's a fly in the soup as such. What's the problem? What's that? Well, we're going to get to that. Rebekah did hear it. He couldn't see, so that's a problem. He's going to have a problem. That's going to create a problem for him.
He didn't include the family in all this.
Okay, but he didn't include somebody else in this. God. He didn't include God. And if you look back at Genesis 25:23, Isaac is told there that the older will serve the younger. So here we see that Isaac's idea, the idea was not bad, but he made a bad choice. That in his idea, he wanted to extend this blessing, but he was going against God's will because God had told him the blessing was to go to Jacob, not to Esau. So here he's trying to get around what God told him. This reminds me, every once in a while I'll give you this story about my dad. I may have shared this one, I don't know if I have or not, but my dad had a great idea. His execution wasn't so good on this. His great idea was he had a heart attack. I think I told you that. He had a heart attack. Well, he had not made out his will. So in the ambulance going to the hospital, he's writing down his will. Well, he only gets about 2/3 the way through it till they get to the hospital, and he never finishes it after that. I mean, he has the surgery and so forth, so he never goes back to finish it. So he had a great idea. I need to have a will prepared, but his execution of finishing it and following through, and when he did it, wasn't such a good idea. So here, Isaac has a great idea. I need to go to pass this blessing on, but his execution in following God's will in this, he's off base. He's trying to do it according to what he wants rather than what God wanted. Okay, so do you think Isaac was feeling some self-pity here? Yeah, I do too. So how do we react when we are feeling self-pity? Pitiful. Isaac's old, he's blind, he thinks he's on his deathbed, so yeah, I think he's feeling some self-pity. So feels like everybody owes us something. Have a pity party. Why did Jan do that to me? Yeah. He's trying to draw his son Esau into his pity party. I'm about to die, so go out and cook me a meal. Yes, Becky? Evidently not at this point they hadn't, so I don't know if they after that if it did or not. Good question. Have ceremonies for other things, don't they? So what? That's a good point. That's a good point, Becky. Why do you think he didn't have a big ceremony to do this? He didn't want everybody to know, did he? Yeah. So he was trying to slip this over on Rebecca and on Jacob, but more importantly, over on God, he thought. But having self-pity often causes, I think, one to act irrationally. And here maybe Isaac is acting irrationally. So true or false, Isaac as the mark should receive sympathy. Do we have sympathy for him? No. Say no. Anybody say yes? Why? Well, first off, why do you say no? Acting like a big baby. Yeah.
Well, Esau was his favorite, and he'd already given Jacob the inheritance, and so I think he was just trying to give his beloved son something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's trying to make up for the mistake Esau had already made.
Because it normally goes to the older one.
Yeah.
So
normally it goes to the older one.
He wanted to leave the one he loved something.
Yeah. So no sympathy then, you think, for Isaac. Here's this old blind man. You don't have any sympathy for him? Thinks he's dying? Man, y'all are a tough crowd. Jeff, I'm trying to summarize. Jeff says that way I put it was, Isaac's trying to thwart God's plan. He's trying to, as Jeff said, trying to take control of it on his own. For that reason, we don't have I don't think we have any sympathy for him, but on the other hand, possibly we can feel sympathy for Isaac as we would feel sympathy for any or all who fail to follow God's plan. Any person who is an unbeliever, doesn't accept Christ, we should have sympathy for. We should have sympathy for those outside of God's will. Not to, quote, accept them, but to hope that they find the way back to God's will, to God's plan. So, what failures do you see in Isaac's actions? There's several. Not trusting God. Isaac tried to circumvent God's direction, in that God told him the older would serve the younger, so he didn't trust God with that. What else?
He's going to divide his family.
He's going to divide his family. He's continuing to perpetuate, that's a hard word, perpetuate favoritism in his family, so it's going to cause division. Yeah. Shouldn't have a favorite to begin with, a favorite child to begin with, so that's an issue. What was Isaac's main thought here at the end of his life? Food. Yeah, food. He was here at the end of his life, his chief concern was, I want to have a good meal, a big meal of my favorite meal here before I go. And Isaac was focused on the worldly rather than the spiritual. So several problems we see here with Isaac's actions. And then Esau had, as we said earlier, had already sold his birthright to Jacob. What's the difference? Again, let's clarify the difference in the birthright and the blessing. What's the difference? Martha, I think, referenced it a minute ago.
Well, the birthright was the inheritance and being in charge of all the herds and people and slaves and all that.
The birthright has to do with financial, and typically the older we get with two descendants, the older two male descendants, the older we get 2/3 and the younger 1/3. Well, that was to be reversed in this situation according to what God said, although they were trying to thwart that. So Esau sold his birthright, the 2/3 versus the 1/3. So to begin, that's the birthright. The blessing, on the other hand, the blessing is given by, in this case, the clan patriarch, who's Isaac at this point. It was of great significance as such because it conferred the right to rule the clan as such after the patriarch's death. So the blessing was, the birthright was financial. The blessing was more of a positional type thing, to be the leader of the clan. Well, that's a good point, Jill. If you had multiple children, whatever, you decide I'm going to give one the power of attorney, then they have kind of control over the financial aspects, at least, of that. Yep, it's a good point. So, all right. With that, Stan, would you put up that next visual? And Martha, would you read Genesis 27, verses 5 through 17? We're going to now take a look at the next character in this thing or deception. That's Rebekah, the con artist. Okay?
Now Rebekah was listening to what Isaac said to his son Esau. So while Esau went to the field to hunt some game to bring in, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, "Listen, I heard your father talking with your brother Esau, and he said, 'Bring me the game and make a delicious meal for me to eat so that I can bless you in the Lord's presence before I die. Now obey every order I give you, my son. Go to the flock and bring me 2 choice young goats, and I will make them into a delicious meal for your father, the kind he loves. Then take it to your father to eat, so that he may bless you before he dies." And Jacob answered Rebekah's mother, his mother, "Look, my brother Esau is a hairy man, but I am a man with smooth skin. Suppose my father touches me, then I will be revealed to him as a deceiver and bring a curse rather than a blessing on myself." And his mother said to him, "Your curse will be on me, my son. Just obey me and go get them for me." So he went and got the goats and brought them to his mother, and his mother made the delicious food his father loved. Then Rebekah took the best clothes of her older son Esau, which were in the house, and had her younger son Jacob wear them. She put the skins of the young goats on his hands and the smooth part of his neck, and then she handed the delicious food and the bread she had made to her son Jacob.
All right, so what was Rebekah doing while Isaac was instructing Esau? Eavesdropping. She had her ear up to the tent flap, right? Like this that looks kind of like her, I think. Like this woman here has her ear up to, I guess that's the door or whatever. So Rebekah was eavesdropping. She was overhearing, trying to overhear what was being discussed between Isaac and Esau. Sir Walter Scott wrote in his poem, Marmion, I didn't know this is where this came from, "Oh, what a tangle web we weave when we first practice to deceive." So we will certainly see that this is the case with Isaac, Esau, Rebekah, and Jacob. So in Genesis chapter 27, verse 5, how did Rebekah refer to Esau? His son, exactly, Isaac's son. She didn't refer to him as my son or our son, did she? Okay, so we see this split here and just how they refer to the children. In Genesis 27:8, how did Rebekah refer to Jacob? My son. So we see in these verses that Martha just read 4 times in these verses, Rebekah refers to Jacob as my son or her son, not as our son. So we see this favoritism being, again, perpetuated in just how they refer to the children. So what are your thoughts on Rebekah's actions as a mother, as a wife? Is what? Deceptive, yeah. Not how she should have been acting. She had her favorite also, Jan says. Was she acting as spouses are called to be helpmates? Was she acting as a helpmate? No, she was acting more as an adversary. Do you think her eavesdropping set a good role model as a mother? Maybe. You know, there's probably a desire now to go look in that computer and on that cell phone, what are these kids up to, right? It's kind of a form of eavesdropping, but here, who's she eavesdropping on? Her husband, yeah. So, Rebekah was scheming here a deceitful plan or sting against her husband or son, while at the same time she was soliciting help as an accomplice from her other son. So I don't think Rebekah was going to get the Good Housekeeping Award for Wife or Mother of the Year based upon her actions here. Yeah. Good point, Karen. Karen said she didn't trust Isaac either. So, yeah, so there's a lack of trust in this relationship, which brings up a good point. Where could that lack of trust have come from? Favoritism with the kids, but even before that. Yeah, a line about Rebekah being his sister rather than his wife, lying to Abimelech. So there was a big schism of lack of trust that could have occurred or did occur. So, all right, so with that, James, the brother of Jesus, in his book, the book of James, has some good advice related to this situation. So, Martha, if you would read James chapter 3, verses 13 through 18. Listen carefully. Did I not give you that one? I'm sorry.
Who among you is wise and understanding? Let him show by his good behavior his deeds in the gentleness of wisdom. But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your heart, do not be arrogant and so lie against the truth. This wisdom is not that which comes down from above, but is earthly, natural, demonic. For where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there is disorder in everything and every evil thing. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, reasonable, full of mercy and good fruits, unwavering, without hypocrisy. And the seed whose fruit is righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace.
Verse 16 there says, for where jealousy and selfish ambition exists, there is disorder in every evil thing. I think that verse describes pretty clearly what's going on here with Isaac and Esau and Rebekah and Jacob. There's jealousy, there's selfish ambition, and we'll see that disorder and evil results from it. And then on down in verse 17, Martha, read 17 again, because yours had a different word than mine. I want to see what your word is again.
In 17?
Mm-hmm, please.
Then she handed the delicious food.
I'm sorry, James 3:17. Did you already turn? I'm sorry.
But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, reasonable, full of mercy and good fruits, unwavering, without hypocrisy.
All right. In her translation, it says unwavering. I'm not sure what translation I use, but here it says, mine says impartial. And here, some of you have that same translation. So here we're seeing partiality on both sides of the family as such. So again, the result of that is that we're going back to the previous verse, disorder in every evil thing is the result of partiality. So how do you think Isaac and Rebekah did, and we just kind of said this, in following James' words of advice? What's that? I can't hear you, Debbie. They did not follow those words of advice, did they? They were far from it. They had a good start at the beginning, but they have become a very dysfunctional family. Warren Wiersbe puts it this way: Isaac was depending on his own physical senses, but Rebekah was depending on the wisdom of the world. Both of them were taking things into their own hands rather than trusting God, rather than following God's plan as such. So what do you think about the timing of Rebekah's plan of deceit, her sting operation?
Jeff had a comment.
What's that? Oh, I'm sorry, Jeff. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Jeff jumped ahead to a future question. So he's saying that this reminds us of Sarah, because Sarah and Rebekah had motives, maybe the right motives, but they didn't have the right methods. They didn't trust God to work things out. They tried to take things into their own hands and work them out as they thought they should be worked out, rather than being patient and waiting on God. All right, remember, that's an answer to a future question, so y'all remember what Jeff said. So what do you think about the timing, though? Rebekah's here got ear up to the tent, hears what's going on. What'd she do? She sprung into action. So, what do you think about how quickly what's that? She must have thought he's going to die too, so he was, yeah, could be.
She could have gone in and given Isaac an earful.
She could have gone in and given Isaac an earful. That's a good point. One, she didn't. Seems like she's waiting for an opportunity, which implies what, Susie? That it's premeditated. She had a lot of this stuff. You just don't go out and find this hairy stuff to put on Jacob and whatever, and have these goats all ready to cook up and so forth. So there could have been some premeditation here. She could have been waiting for the right time to pull off the sting as such. So yeah, that's kind of what I thought was a possibility too, Susie. So what's Jacob's initial response to his mother's plan? So what? He's afraid he would get caught. He wasn't concerned about it being right or wrong. He was just concerned about, I might be found out. I might be caught, as Debbie says. So he was more concerned about being detected than he was what was right. So Esau was hairy. Jacob was not. Jacob was fearful that Isaac would want to touch him and realize he was not Esau. So because of Jacob's reaction to Rebekah's plan, was he concerned about what could happen to him? What could happen to Jacob? What do you think could happen to him?
He could be cursed.
He could be cursed. So instead of receiving a blessing, he could receive a curse. I think this is kind of interesting that you remember, let's back up here. Where did this concept of cursing and blessing come from? From God, but to whom? Abraham. So Abraham, you remember, those who bless you will be blessed, those who curse you will be cursed. So this concept of blessing and cursing began with Abraham. So there was some real power or fear, you might say, with this. So God had told Abraham this. So obviously Isaac and Jacob knew this. Yeah, Mar.
Well, Alice and I were talking, Adam and Eve were cursed. I mean, the ground was cursed. He would have to work it, and
God put the curse on Adam or the punishment on curse on Adam and Eve. Yeah.
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 And on Cain.
And Cain. Yeah. So it was this concept was a real concept at that time. I mean, we don't think about that being, a real concept. I mean, maybe it's a real concept, but it has not having real consequences at this time. So, but to them, this had real consequences. So Jacob was concerned about this. Yeah, Jeff is saying curse and judgment, and their concept was similar, if not the same. Yeah. So, yes. Oh, I'm sorry, Helen. Typically, the blessing went to the elders male. So, but here God had told them the elder was going to serve the younger. So that implied that the blessing was to go to the younger, being Jacob versus Esau. If Rebekah had not worked out this scheme and Jacob had blessed Esau, it would not have been God's will. Now, the question is, though, would God have allowed that? Would God have stepped in without Rebekah working out her sting operation to prevent that? So, or worked out another solution that's beyond my comprehension anyway. Alice has something there. We don't know. Yeah. 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 Jeff says that we do know that God's will would have been done. That in this case, the younger, Jacob, would have received the blessing rather than Esau. We don't know how it would have happened, but we know that it would have happened. Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't going to be accomplished that way. As Jeff said, maybe he was out there, if Rebecca hadn't stepped in, we don't know, but maybe they were out there and some bear ate him or something, so then he was gone. But we don't know, but God would already made, this is the plan. Jacob's receiving the blessing, so that was what was going to happen. Rebecca steps in, though, and takes over the plan rather than let God work out his plan. Okay. All right, we're over time, but good questions, good comments, good feedback this morning. I appreciate that. We'll pick up here next week, and who knows, we might even finish this lesson next week, but I wouldn't bet on it. So, good.